April 16, 1988. Tunis. In just 90 seconds, one of the most precise, controversial, and politically explosive assassinations of the 20th century took place. Khalil al-Wazir, better known as Abu Jihad, the co-founder of Fatah and the second-in-command to Yasser Arafat, was gunned down in his own villa by Israeli commandos, thousands of miles away from their borders, deep in the heart of a sovereign.
If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Your feedback helps shape what we cover next, and you being here keeps the conversation going. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.
Nation. The mission wasn't just daring, it was a warning. But it would come with consequences Israel didn't plan for. Abu Jihad was more than just a military figure. He was a symbol. A refugee turned leader, born in what was then mandatory Palestine and exiled after the 1948 war. Alongside Arafat, he helped found Fatah, the most dominant faction of the Palestine Liberation Organization. His strategic mind was behind some of the most high-profile and devastating attacks during the 60s and 70s. That included the 1978 Coastal Road Massacre, one of the deadliest attacks on Israeli civilians, which left dozens dead. By the 1980s, he had become the nerve center of Palestinian armed resistance, coordinating operations from Tunis, far from the battlefields but never out of reach. His hands were deep in planning, logistics, and rallying fighters during the early stages of the First Intifada. In Israel's eyes, he wasn't just a threat, he was the threat. And that's exactly why he was targeted. The operation that took him out was the product of months of surveillance, intelligence gathering, and rehearsals. This wasn't just a hit, it was an international breach of sovereignty, a black ops mission that would make waves across the globe. Mossad and Israeli military intelligence had been watching Abu Jihad for years. But the tipping point came when Israeli leadership decided his continued coordination of armed resistance was prolonging the Intifada and making peace or even stability impossible. So they built an operation that looked more like a Hollywood heist movie than a traditional military raid. First came the human intel informants inside the PLO, perhaps even within Abu Jihad's inner circle. Then the technical surveillance tracking his routines, phone calls, floor plans of his home. Every light switch, every guard rotation, every late-night meeting logged and studied. The assault team trained in a mock-up of his villa. They knew exactly where to go, who to eliminate, and how much time they'd need. Naval forces transported the team to the Tunisian coast using missile boats, and small landing craft brought them ashore. The whole mission was shrouded in layers of secrecy: real-time intel, backup teams, fake identities, multiple exits. The plan was tight. They would enter silently, take out the guards with suppressed weapons, and get to Abu Jihad's room before he had time to grab a weapon or call for help. And that's exactly what they did. At 1 a.m. the team infiltrated his compound. One by one, they eliminated the guards. The entire villa was breached in under 2 minutes. Abu Jihad heard the commotion and reached for his weapon, but it was too late. The commandos stormed in, shooting him multiple times. According to reports, he was shot in front of his wife. The entire engagement lasted less than 90 seconds. But the ripple effect was anything but brief. News spread fast. Abu Jihad's death was confirmed the next morning, and the reaction in the Palestinian territories was immediate. Widespread protests erupted. To Palestinians, he wasn't just a military leader, he was a martyr, a father figure, a symbol of resistance. Tens of thousands attended his funeral, and his name became a rallying cry. Internationally, the blowback was intense. Tunisia accused Israel of violating its sovereignty and severed diplomatic ties. The United Nations Security Council condemned the raid. Western nations criticized Israel's decision to carry out a military assassination on foreign soil. But Israel never officially took responsibility. Instead, they leaned into strategic ambiguity, a tactic they've used often: say nothing, confirm nothing, let the message speak for itself. And make no mistake, the message was loud. Beyond the assassination itself, the operation also yielded a trove of intelligence. Documents, recordings, contact lists. By taking out Abu Jihad, Israel wasn't just eliminating a leader, they were cutting off a central node in the resistance network. Or so they thought. Here's where things get complicated. Because while the operation was a technical and tactical success, it didn't have the long-term strategic impact Israel may have hoped for. The First Intifada continued. And in fact, Abu Jihad's death only strengthened the more radical voices within the Palestinian movement. Moderate factions lost influence. The sense of loss, injustice, and martyrdom fueled recruitment, not silence. This is the paradox of targeted killings. They may remove a threat, but they often create something else in its place: chaos, retaliation, power vacuums. In this case, Abu Jihad's absence didn't end the uprising. It deepened it. The operation also sparked renewed debate over the ethics and legality of cross-border assassinations. Israel had violated international law by launching a military assault inside Tunisia, a country that wasn't at war with them. Critics pointed to the dangerous precedent it set. If powerful nations can just eliminate enemies wherever they hide, what happens to the rules? What's left of sovereignty? But to Israel, the question wasn't legality, it was necessity. Abu Jihad had coordinated multiple attacks that resulted in civilian deaths. He was, in their view, a ticking bomb. Eliminating him, they argued, saved future lives. This is the same debate that continues to play out in counterterrorism circles today, especially as drone strikes and covert hits become normalized in global military strategy. Still, the political blowback couldn't be ignored. Relations with Tunisia tanked. The operation isolated Israel diplomatically at a sensitive time. Even allies expressed concern. But behind closed doors, you can bet military planners around the world were taking notes. Because what Israel pulled off wasn't just bold, it was groundbreaking. The integration of human intelligence, surveillance, mock rehearsals, naval logistics, and surgical execution became a model for future operations. The idea that no one was truly safe, not even in a distant villa in a neutral country, redefined the playbook for modern counterterrorism. And it wasn't just Israel that learned from this. The success of the Abu Jihad operation influenced doctrines across the globe, especially in Western military circles. From the US raids in Pakistan to other clandestine operations in sovereign nations, the blueprint created by Israel in 1988 continues to shape the way special forces approach high-value targets. But again, success depends on what you're measuring. If you're measuring by execution, the mission was flawless. But if you're looking at the bigger picture, Palestinian politics, regional stability, peace prospects, it gets murky. Abu Jihad's death removed a leader, but it didn't end the violence. Instead, it helped galvanize hardliners, weaken diplomatic efforts, and prolong the conflict. And that's the dark irony at the heart of all this. Sometimes, a perfect operation on paper leads to imperfect outcomes in the real world. Abu Jihad's legacy didn't end with his death. For many Palestinians, he became larger in martyrdom than he ever was in life. His image, his speeches, his strategies, they became part of the resistance playbook. Meanwhile, Israeli policymakers had to grapple with the aftermath, diplomatic fallout, moral scrutiny, and the realization that even the most precise operation can't untangle a conflict this deep-rooted. The assassination of Abu Jihad remains one of the boldest and most controversial targeted killings ever carried out. It was a masterclass in covert warfare but also a cautionary tale. Because in the shadow world of espionage and special ops, even total success can come with consequences no one can fully control. If this story shocked you, made you rethink what you thought you knew about modern warfare, or just left you stunned at how far nations will go in the name of security, then don't forget to hit like, share this with someone who needs a dose of reality, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Should targeted assassinations be legal? Do they actually work, and if not, why do governments keep doing them? And of course subscribe for more stories where history, power, and politics collide in the most jaw-dropping ways. Because this was just one operation. There are plenty more in the shadows. Let us pick up right where we left off, because trust me, the shadow cast by this operation didn't stop in 1988. It crept into policy rooms, war rooms, and political debates for decades to come. Even though Israel never officially confirmed its role in the assassination, it didn't really need to. The details were too clean, too specific, and too familiar. Everyone knew Mossad's fingerprints when they saw them. This was their brand of warfare, quiet, surgical, and deniable until it wasn't. And in this case, the world couldn't look away. The backlash was swift. Tunisia wasn't just angry, they were humiliated. A sovereign country, totally blindsided, played like a pawn in someone else's game. They called it a violation of international law. And they weren't wrong. The United Nations Security Council stepped in, issuing a formal condemnation. This wasn't some rogue militia acting on impulse. This was a state-sponsored military force, operating inside another country without permission, executing a political figure in his own home. And yet, within Israel, the mood was different. To many, it was seen as a win, a flex. Abu Jihad wasn't just another figure in the PLO. He was the guy organizing resistance across borders, across decades. His death sent a message: it didn't matter where you were. If you were considered a threat, you were reachable. That kind of reach wasn't just tactical power, it was psychological warfare. But here's where the story really complicates itself. Because while the assassination was a tactical triumph, it didn't change the larger reality on the ground. The First Intifada didn't end. If anything, the fury over Abu Jihad's death added fuel to the fire. The protests, the retaliatory attacks, the international outrage, it all escalated. And within the Palestinian territories, something even more subtle but no less dangerous began to happen. Moderate voices lost ground. Abu Jihad, despite his role in orchestrating attacks, had also been a unifying figure. His death left a vacuum. And vacuums in politics don't stay empty for long. Radical factions gained traction. The idea of negotiating with Israel, it got colder. Hardliners used the assassination as proof that diplomacy was a dead end, that violence was the only language Israel understood. That shift would haunt the region for years to come. So while Israel celebrated the elimination of a mastermind, they also paved the way for more chaos, more division, and more entrenchment. It's the paradox of decapitation strategy: cut off the head, but watch two more grow back. Now let us talk about what this meant in terms of military doctrine. Because this raid didn't just echo in Gaza or Ramallah or Tel Aviv, it echoed in Washington, London, Paris, Islamabad. Military leaders around the world studied the details, both what was publicly known and what could be inferred. How do you infiltrate deep into enemy territory without leaving a trace? How do you train for a 90-second assault where failure isn't an option? The takeaway was clear: success isn't just about firepower, it's about planning. intelligence, rehearsal, and above all, surprise. The Abu Jihad assassination became a textbook case in elite military circles. It helped reshape the playbook for special operations and counterterrorism for decades. Flash forward to operations like the U.S. Navy SEAL raid on Osama bin Laden in Pakistan. The resemblance isn't a coincidence. High-value target. Foreign soil. Late-night timing. Months of surveillance and mock rehearsals. The DNA of that mission can be traced back to Tunis, 1988. And that's what makes the story so relevant today. Because it wasn't just a dramatic episode in a long-running conflict, it was a shift in how the world deals with threats. From conventional wars to covert eliminations. From battlefields to bedrooms. And this is a big but, there's still that lingering question. Did it work? If your goal is to remove one man from the equation, yes. It worked flawlessly. But if your goal is to dismantle a movement, end an uprising, or change hearts and minds, that's where the line blurs. Killing Abu Jihad didn't stop the Intifada. It didn't bring Israel closer to peace. And it didn't make Palestinians give up. If anything, it hardened resistance. It turned Abu Jihad into a martyr, a symbol, an eternal presence in the cause he fought for. His posters went up in streets across Gaza and the West Bank. His speeches were replayed. His legacy immortalized. That's the thing about symbolic figures, they don't disappear when they die. They often become louder in death than they ever were in life. And for Israel, this operation also set a precedent they returned to repeatedly. Targeted assassinations became part of their military and intelligence strategy, not just abroad, but in Gaza, in Lebanon, in other parts of the Middle East. Each time, it brought tactical success and renewed political fallout. International law experts raised alarm bells. Was this the future of warfare? States taking out enemies unilaterally, bypassing courts, diplomacy, extradition. Some called it necessary. Others called it dangerous. A slippery slope into lawlessness. But in Tel Aviv, the logic was simple. Waiting for international processes could mean waiting for the next attack. If someone was orchestrating strikes, recruiting fighters, or funding operations, why wait? And honestly, that's the heart of the modern counterterrorism dilemma. The world wants rules. But when enemies don't play by them, those rules get bent, sometimes broken entirely. It also forced uncomfortable conversations in diplomatic circles. Allies of Israel were caught in the middle. Publicly condemning the operation, while privately understanding the logic. It created tension between the desire for international norms and the brutal reality of asymmetric warfare. Abu Jihad's killing wasn't just a strike, it was a mirror held up to the world. A reflection of how messy, murky, and morally gray these decisions are. And it left everyone asking, is this the price of security? And more importantly, who gets to decide? Decades later, the ripples are still being felt. Israeli special forces have only grown more sophisticated. Intelligence gathering more invasive. Surveillance tech more advanced. The model used in Tunis has been refined, digitized, and exported. Meanwhile, Palestinian leadership remains fractured, the conflict unresolved, and the cycles of violence unbroken. In hindsight, the operation that eliminated Abu Jihad didn't change the conflict. It changed how the conflict was fought. It shifted tactics. It elevated the role of covert ops. It made headlines, yes, but it also rewrote playbooks. And for the average person watching from the outside, it serves as a reminder of how far countries will go to eliminate a threat and how little control they have over what happens next. You don't have to agree with the operation to recognize its impact. It was one of the most effective, complex, and globally influential assassinations ever attempted. But it also laid bare the contradictions of modern warfare, where victory can come in 90 seconds but the consequences can last forever. Let us take one last look at what this operation really did, because the devil wasn't just in the execution. It was in the fallout. And it's still playing out. When Mossad and Israeli special forces pulled off the Abu Jihad raid, they weren't just neutralizing a target, they were declaring a philosophy. One that said, borders don't matter. Diplomacy can wait. And if you're seen as an existential threat, you're already living on borrowed time. That philosophy didn't end with Abu Jihad. It became a foundational principle in Israel's national security doctrine. Decapitate, disrupt, deny. But here's what doesn't get enough attention: that very doctrine has ripple effects outside the battlefield. It reshapes diplomacy, public opinion, even peace negotiations. Every time a high-profile figure is assassinated, the world watches, waiting to see who condemns it, who defends it, and who stays silent. In Abu Jihad's case, the silence from some quarters was deafening. Sure, there were public statements, UN resolutions, diplomatic outrage. But behind closed doors some governments quietly acknowledged the effectiveness. Some even took notes. Because the uncomfortable truth is that global powers often admire what they publicly denounce, especially when it works. That's what makes this assassination so haunting. It didn't just eliminate a leader. It gave others a playbook. It showed what was possible when a state was willing to cross lines literally and figuratively. And Abu Jihad, his legacy only expanded after death. The man who had once coordinated operations in shadows became a symbol etched in public memory. To Palestinians, he represented not just armed resistance, but resilience. His name became shorthand for sacrifice, for national struggle, for a people who felt the world wasn't listening. That's the part Israel couldn't kill. The myth. The martyrdom. The emotional aftershock. When you take out a symbol, you risk turning them into legend. And that legend can become more powerful than the man ever was. So now, decades later, what are we left with? An operation studied in military academies. A martyr honored in refugee camps. And a question that still has no clear answer: did it help, or did it just reset the board because the conflict didn't end? The bloodshed didn't stop. If anything, it deepened. Peace remained elusive, and the same cycle: strike, retaliate, condemn, repeat continued. That's what makes the story timeless. It's not just about one night in Tunis. It's about the endless tension between power and principle, between action and aftermath. And if this left you reeling, hit that like button. Share it with someone who thinks history doesn't repeat, just remixes. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Did this change everything, or was it just another chapter in a war with no end? And make sure you're subscribed, because this kind of story, it's never really over.